Hi, my name is Ellie. I've always been known for my good looks. I am tall, red-haired, with long legs, and an athletic figure. At 29, I found myself without a husband or children. I decided to buy an apartment and live alone. And it wouldn't have been so bad if it weren't for my neighbor living on the other side of the wall. First of all, he is incredibly handsome and charming. It's just a shame he's married and has kids. My attention was immediately drawn to the motorcycle parked in his driveway. It's a cool, not overly sporty, but pretty big and shiny motorcycle. Looks like all the interesting men are already taken, I thought to myself. He looked so adorable when he came home and took off his helmet, just like in the movies. We often ran into each other in the yard, and although nothing ever happened between us, I couldn't help but eavesdrop on their lively conversation through the wall. He and his wife seemed to be sending the kids to their grandmothers and partying in bed all night. He was handsome and passionate, a real dream. I even found myself listening and envious. I caught myself daydreaming about having a man like him at my place. I didn't care if he was busy or free. It's easy to find a partner, but he was the one I needed. Especially since I wasn't even looking for a relationship. I just wanted intimacy, no relationship, and he's married, so there's almost no chance of meeting him. I started looking for opportunities to meet him. He regularly went out to smoke on the playground, and I thought I could smell him through the door. One day I purposely went out for a smoke and waited for him. He wasn't expecting to see me and looked a little flustered. He was shirtless, wearing gym shorts, and just the thought of him drove me crazy. "I didn't know you smoked," he said, "and sometimes I really wanted to." I answered him with a smile. I was wearing a short silk robe, and it was quite definitely intentional. I wanted to show off my beautiful legs. And it was not in vain. His eyes wandered over me. It was a brief encounter, but when I got home, I realized that I had intrigued him. The goal of captivating this handsome man was firmly planted in my mind. A few days later, we exchanged phone numbers under the pretext of helping a lonely girl with her repairs. Now I was looking forward to the weekend. I paced around the apartment, anticipating his arrival for a smoke. And just as I had hoped, he came out. "Hi," he greeted, taking a cigarette from the pack. I was still wearing the same amazing robe. I could feel his gaze on my skin, even though he was trying to hide it. I felt a rush of embarrassment. We talked for a while, and it turned out that he had been drinking. To my surprise, his wife was out of town for a week. This news made me feel a little dizzy. I said goodbye to him, and went back to my apartment, scolding myself for not being bold. He went home too, but a few minutes later there was a quiet knock on my door. I flinched in surprise. I quietly walked to the door, and there he stood. I froze, gathering my thoughts before opening the door. We stared into each other's eyes in silence for a few moments. Suddenly he grabbed my head and kissed me passionately. At that moment, things started to unfold rapidly. It was the beginning of a great whirlwind of events. When he eventually left, I realized that he and I had a whole week of bedroom adventures ahead of us. I had been looking forward to this moment for so long. However, now I want more than just a week with him in bed. I want him to be mine forever. To accomplish this, I intend to use all my knowledge and efforts in this endeavor. Even the fact that he's married won't stop me. He'll be mine, even if I'm considered a bad person, but I can't be without him. I want to go away with him on his motorcycle somewhere, where we won't be interfered with. Living together. Story number 2. My name is Allison, and I want to share my life story with you. My husband, Donald, and I recently moved into a new apartment. Because of his demanding job, Donald is off and away on business trips. This morning, I woke up feeling rested after a sound night's sleep. I made myself a cup of coffee in the kitchen and went out to the balcony. While I was enjoying my coffee, a light breeze played with my loose hair, and I looked at the neighboring house across the street. To my surprise, I noticed a man on the balcony watching me. My balcony windows go low, so he could see everything he needed to see. I went into the room for a moment, then decided to go back out. Somehow, I started to like the way he was looking at me. When I came back, the man was gone. I continued to go about my daily business. The next day, I woke up later than usual. After going to the bathroom, I went out on the balcony in my transparent underwear. I liked taking morning walks, especially when I was home alone. The weather outside was pleasant. I glanced at the balcony where a man was looking at me the day before, and to my surprise, he was there again. Noticing me looking at him, he waved and I returned his smile. Even though the houses were next to each other, but separated by a distance, I could clearly see that he was looking at me intently. I had the thought that he might have liked me. A week later, I ran into him by chance. As I was walking back from the store, he suggested that I talk to him. He seemed like a great conversationalist, and we ended up exchanging phone numbers. He said he would call me, but a few days passed, and he never called. I continued to go about my daily business, almost forgetting about our meeting. One evening, however, the phone rang, and it was him. He apologized for the delay in calling, explaining that he had to leave unexpectedly. To make it up to me, he invited me to his place. I was hesitant at first, as I was a married woman, but eventually he convinced me to come over. When I arrived, I found his beautiful apartment. He invited me to sit at the table. There was fruit and a bottle of wine on the table. When we sat down, he went to the window, pulled the curtains, and lit candles, creating a beautiful atmosphere. He raised his glass and a toast to a beautiful woman, which made me smile, and we drank. About an hour passed, and the bottle of wine was making itself felt. He moved closer, and I felt his hot breath. I tried to move away, but he put his hand on my neck and pulled me closer to him. I tried to take his hand away, but he pressed me even tighter to him. He picked me up and pushed me on the couch. At first, I was scared, but then I liked it all, and that's where our love story happened. After that, he kicked me out of the apartment, said I was just another bad girl on his list. Said he got what he wanted, and now he didn't need me. I'm so sorry about what happened. What am I gonna do? I didn't want to cheat on my husband, but I couldn't resist his strong hands. Story 3. Sarah had been staying with her relatives by the ocean in Hawaii for several months. The cozy house was right on the bay, where yachts and fishing boats passed by daily. Her relatives asked her to look after the house while they settled their affairs overseas, promising to return for the summer vacation season. Unfortunately, Sarah couldn't take her husband and child with her as the child had school, and her husband's job wouldn't allow him to leave with her. They would only come for the holidays. To keep herself busy, Sarah took a job as a salesperson in a store selling exclusive goods. When her husband and child were away most of the time, she missed them very much and longed for the moments they spent together. In addition, she was anxious, afraid of cheating on her husband. And now, it was a day off on the calendar, April 4th, and her husband had promised to come on the 5th. Sarah was looking forward to her husband's arrival and decided to refresh herself by taking a shower. The cool water helped her unwind a little from her bad thoughts. After eating breakfast and getting ready, Sarah sank back into her negative thoughts. Suddenly, her husband decided to surprise her and arrived a day early. Sneaking into the house, he accidentally startled her. Sarah was frightened and said unnecessary things, which led to a stormy quarrel between them. The whole weekend was ruined, with nothing but arguments, while all she wanted was love and affection. Unfortunately, her husband left without resolving their problems. To strut, Sarah went for a walk on the beach, pondering the complexities of her relationship with her husband. She longed for the passion that had once been between them. Feeling lost, Sarah made the decision to seek medical advice. She found a young doctor named Michael, who was sympathetic to her situation. Michael had a spacious office, and Sarah sat down on a comfortable couch next to his desk. He turned on his laptop and showed Sarah various pictures on the screen. After taking note of all her answers, the doctor concluded that it was quite complicated, and it would take several sessions to help her sort out her thoughts. He carefully recorded all of her information, and, after learning that Sarah lived alone, offered to hold the sessions at her home, thinking it would be more helpful. And so the day of the session arrived. Sarah was very nervous as she waited for the doctor to arrive. Fortunately, he showed up right on time. Sarah sat on the couch, and Michael sat in the chair, making notes in a notebook. After an hour, the session came to an end. But Sarah didn't want the young doctor to leave. She felt lonely and wanted someone to talk to as well as a drink. Surprisingly, the doctor agreed to extend the therapy session for special clients like Sarah. They ended up sharing a bottle of wine, had a deep conversation, and when Michael put his arm around her waist and kissed her, Sarah didn't resist. Instead, she suggested they find a more private place. The therapy session continued into the night. Sarah expressed gratitude to the young and talented doctor for helping her. Dr. Michael noted that because of the complexity of Sarah's case, therapy would continue, and he would return to see her every other day to give her time to recover. This regimen continued for another 4 months, until Sarah's family came to visit, and she returned home to her husband. However, she will always remember these therapy sessions. The school year had come to an end. On the agenda was graduation, and then a well-deserved vacation. After that, I needed to consider my next steps. I am Mary, surrounded by a close-knit group of friends. Although there are only 3 of us, we always support each other. Linda and Nicole have been by my side since my early high school years. We weren't particularly close at first, but as we went through high school, our bond grew stronger. We are all slender, tall, and athletic girls. We hit the gym twice a week on a regular basis. When we got together, we discussed possible vacation spots to get away from the chaos of the city. We were also acquainted with some of the boys in our class. Kevin, one of them, suggested we spend the vacation at his country house by the lake. The secluded house was far away from the city, which provided us with privacy. Although I was familiar with Kevin and the other guys who were joining us, I was hesitant to spend a week there. However, my friends managed to convince me. On the day of departure, we packed our bags and hit the road in Kevin's car. By late afternoon, we reached his country residence. The place was incredibly picturesque, decorated with a variety of trees and flowers. We cooked a delicious meal, taking time to roast some meat. Seeking respite from the sun, we found solace in the shade. Not to be put off, the guys graciously poured wine for all of us. Engaged in conversation, they seemed to be discussing cars and our beautiful bodies. Meanwhile, my girlfriends and I were having our own lively discussions. After filled the air, and we enjoyed our time. Spontaneously, we decided to dance, bouncing happily on the grass. Watching our fun, the boys eagerly joined us. However, due to the intense heat, our dancing was short-lived. Kevin suggested we go to a nearby river, a suggestion that was met with unanimous agreement. Upon arrival at the spot, in order to keep their underwear dry, the guys decided to go without. As dusk fell, my girlfriends and I supported the guys in their decision. We followed suit, took off our swimsuits, and entered the warm water. Playfully swimming and frolicking, we enjoyed the moment. And then began the most interesting part of our vacation. The guys began to swim up to each girl, which he won in a dispute with other guys, and took her to the forest, which was next to the river. After about 5 minutes, we already heard familiar sounds from the forest, which made us do the same. Kevin took me by the hand and led me behind a big rock that was near the shore. When we hid, he kissed me and we had a blast. These minutes, I will never forget. Nature, birds, friends not far away, and most importantly, it's a great feature of nature that Kevin has. I think you understand what I wanted to say. Every girl loves that in a guy. Being friends with Richard was pleasant and rewarding. He had a wide circle of female acquaintances that I could only dream of. We often drove around the neighborhood in his new Mustang, meeting girls along the way. Girls eagerly jumped into our car, exuding a sporty and lively spirit. I distinctly remember an occasion when Richard came to my house with 2 girls on board. While he filled his car with fuel taken from me, the girls waited patiently in the car under my window. When Richard gestured for me to look outside and admire his surprise, I was genuinely amazed. This is all ours. I shouted with joy. And what are we going to do with all this? I had already booked a sauna, but I didn't go there empty-handed. Believing his words, I hurried to get dressed. Richard couldn't contain his laughter as we walked out of my house, attracting curious looks from the neighbors. The girls greeted us as if we were the most desirable men in the world, hugging me and kissing me on the lips. The day ahead seemed promising as we entered the sauna, and Richard opened a large bag filled with wine, beer, chips, and fruit. The girls were content to relax. They seemed a little shy, and I sat across from them on the couch and admired their beauty. Of all the captivating scenes, I found this one the most enchanting. The girls were happily devouring the food and drinks arranged on the table. It was in the sauna that I had the opportunity to get to know Grace better, and I realized that I really liked her. Grace was a student whose parents had rented an apartment for her. She was a slender, attractive brunette. I couldn't help but be mesmerized by her beauty. We arranged to have dinner together at a restaurant. It was summer, and she came in a skirt and white blouse that mesmerized me. Despite her initial shyness, we soon found ourselves absorbed in conversation and all barriers between us quickly disappeared. The hours on the summer terrace flew by. I admired her delicate features, her smiling face, her graceful neck and shoulders. There were moments when, under the table, I felt her foot touch mine. Intentionally or accidentally, I don't know. In those moments, I wanted a hug and something more. Time passed quickly and eventually, I walked her home. As we rode the elevator, I found myself in close proximity to her, and her scent was incredibly alluring. I wanted to stop the elevator and kiss her, and the next thing you know what I wanted. Really. When the doors opened, she expressed her gratitude for a pleasant evening. The moment I looked into her shining eyes, it was obvious that neither of us wanted to part. Sensing this, as she leaned over to say goodbye to me with a kiss on the cheek, I moved closer and hugged her. Caught off guard at first, she soon reciprocated, and amidst our heavy breathing, I whispered softly in her ear, "You are truly delightful, and I am madly in love with you." Grace then took my hand and led me to her apartment. We spent a lot of time together, cherishing every moment. A year later, Grace and I were married. Then I had the good fortune to meet her charming mother, who also sympathized with me. But that is a story for another time. I met my downstairs neighbor 2 years ago, shortly after she and her young husband moved into the apartment across the hall from ours. The neighbor, whose name was Natalie, was 55 years old, married to a guy much younger than her, very attractive and good-looking. She spent a lot of time in the fitness room and openly admitted to investing a significant amount of money in her appearance. Natalie worked as a physics teacher, and her husband worked as a Spanish teacher. He possessed a tall stature and strong build, and his name was William. William was a pleasant man, always radiating joy and always smiling. Natalie had met him at the college where she taught. When they moved into our home, I had the opportunity to get to know them, and I couldn't help but wonder how Natalie managed to marry a man so much younger than herself. She confided in me one day, expressing her fear that he might be unfaithful. As our friendship grew, she revealed all her secrets to me, even of an intimate nature. And I enjoyed listening to her. She admitted that their desires were a little out of sync. I think she perceived me as a friend, considering I was only 5 years younger than her. Our connection developed into an exemplary friendship with no hidden secrets. We quickly agreed to meet regularly for coffee at either my place or hers. As time went on, I became more familiar with the couple's lives. One day, Natalie spoke at length about William's preferences in bed and other details of his personal life. After these revelations, my curiosity was piqued, and I began to dream at night about meeting my young neighbor. Meanwhile, my spouse had lost interest in me after several years of marriage together. When summer came, I started going to the pool with them. Eventually, I found myself looking forward to William's visits to the pool without my wife, hoping to meet him on the stairs or on the street. Today, I found myself alone again, as my husband was away on a business trip until next week. Feeling determined, I see nothing wrong with inviting William to my house. I decided to take a walk. The evening was still just beginning, and it was quiet all around. There was a light drizzle, and only the occasional car drove by. I was in a quiet and peaceful neighborhood when I noticed William walking toward me. He walked slowly, smiling his unchanging smile. We stopped, exchanged greetings, and in that moment, I realized that this was an opportunity I should seize immediately. I asked about his wife's whereabouts, and as if he had read my mind, he told me that she had gone to a doctor's appointment after work, and the time of her return was unknown. Thinking, I offered him to come to my place for a cup of coffee, and we quickly went up to the apartment. Putting the kettle on, I sat down next to him. William's gaze stayed on me, and I could feel his interest in me. Smiling, I instinctively moved closer to him. And that's when our first kiss happened. It was at that moment that the flame of desire ignited in us. We both agreed that we should meet as often as possible for lovemaking. He assured me that our affair would remain a secret and promised to always come to visit me. That's how I found a young and handsome lover who lives in the neighborhood. Have you had a similar situation? Write in the comments. Let me share an incident that happened on New Year's Eve with me and my mother-in-law. My girlfriend and I were together for 3 years before we got married a year ago. For the last 6 months, we lived in a separate apartment and her mom visited us often. This story revolves around her. As soon as I met my girlfriend and her mom, I knew I loved them both. Claire, that's her name, is 47 years old and divorced her husband 8 years ago. She's short with black, short cropped hair and stunning green eyes. I've always admired her sense of humor. Despite her height, my mother-in-law had a charming appearance. When my wife and I visited her, I noticed that sometimes she would walk in front of me in her robe and I couldn't help but appreciate her beautiful legs. She was always smiling and flirting with me, and I didn't know how to respond to it. However, it all started by accident. One day, while walking through the kitchen into the room, we accidentally bumped into each other and pressed up against each other. It was quite embarrassing. Another time, my mother-in-law asked me to help her hang pictures and posters while my wife stayed home and did her chores. I went to my mother-in-law's house to help her. She was still wearing the same lovely robe. I brought a step ladder and set it against the wall. She climbed up on it and began to hang the picture. I held the step ladder securely, keeping a close eye on my mother-in-law to avoid an accident. As she was hanging the painting, she suddenly shifted her weight and the stepladder shook. Her foot slipped, but I quickly caught it with my strong hands, preventing her from falling. As she finished hanging the painting, she expressed her gratitude to me, saying that I had saved her from a potential fall. She then told me I could go home. There were many similar incidents, but nothing more serious happened between us. Then New Year's Eve came around. We decided to celebrate it at our house, with the three of us, my wife, my mother-in-law, and me. I made sure that everyone had a variety of alcohol prepared for every taste. My wife was busy preparing delicious food for the table. When my mother-in-law arrived, she took off her coat, and I couldn't help but remark how beautiful she looked. We all sat around the table enjoying martinis and whiskey. By midnight we had finished 2 bottles and everyone was in high spirits. We toasted with champagne and continued to enjoy the evening, watching TV, eating, drinking, and chatting. Around 1:00 a.m., the martini bottle was empty and my wife dozed off at the table. I walked her into the bedroom and helped her get into bed. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law and I, being the most energetic, continued the celebration. Perhaps we just wanted to be alone. After a while, however, my mother-in-law had a few drinks and I decided I'd better tuck her in too. I took her to another bedroom where everything was already prepared for her. As soon as we reached the bedroom, my mother-in-law stumbled a little and hugged me tightly. Then she said affectionately, "Son-in-law, I won't let you go now," and smiled at me. At that moment, I understood everything and smiled back. I thought to myself, this is what the new year has brought us to. That night, the New Year's Eve celebration made us dizzy. The next morning, I did not dare to get up, fearing the consequences of a fun night with my mother-in-law. The first to wake up was my wife. She went to freshen up and drink her morning coffee. Then her mother-in-law followed suit, and finally I got up as well. When I entered the kitchen, they were already busy talking. As if nothing had happened, I greeted them with a cheerful good morning. My mother-in-law agreed and said it was the most delightful morning she had experienced in a long time. Her eyes glistened as she said those words. I realized then that my mother-in-law and I had developed a lasting friendship, and it was truly wonderful.